Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Karen Roof, and I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Safe and Healthy Communities. And we're going to be talking about the Outdoor Livability Assessment Tool, or we refer to it as the OLAT, which also helps us assess the health and safety of parks for all ages and abilities. So briefly about the organization, again, it is a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating and ensuring safe, healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities for all. We focus on improving decision-making, equity, and public health outcomes, working in other disciplines like planning, transportation, housing, climate, and the environment. We do focus on the built environment and policies and programs. And this work, the OLAT and other tools that we have are all funded by the Next 50 initiative, who are really a great foundation that focuses on improving the lives of older adults. So when we talk about older adults and aging, what words do we use? Is it in a positive light? How do we describe older adults or aging? What are the stereotypes that we use to identify or represent or talk about older adults? So, for example, a sign here where it's a sign that's representing older adults. And as you can see, people are they're very hunched over, using a cane, she's holding on to him. Often this can be a way that we represent older adults, definitely hunched over, etc. When some people have been changing what that signage that we're using, or the words and how we describe things, and really focusing on this, which I think it's really important for all of us to do. And you can see in this picture, it definitely has a different feel to it, right? They're in full stride. They both have a cane, holding on to one another, but it has a very different feel than the picture on the left. And so again, how do we really kind of think about how we're talking about and describing and using pictures to represent older adults and aging? So what are some of the major changes as we age? What do you think of when you think about people aging? So some of those might be a body composition and maybe even decrease in height, but certainly some people, it can impede the stamina, the same level or that level of activity, the duration that you could do certain activities can change. Hearing, the kind of inner ear can weaken, those muscles can weaken and stiffen, and definitely change how we can communicate as older adults, and certainly hear, whether we're in a restaurant and being able to hear the person next to us compared to all the other voices and sounds around. Can we just still distinguish those? And that can get harder as we get older. And certainly mobility, having arthritis and maybe reducing some strength, etc., and range of motion can happen. Vision, so certainly when people, even when they're turning 50, can start having more challenges reading things up close. And certainly as we get older, when you walked into a room, for example, the light that was needed when we were younger to see things in the room now changes, and we need actually more light, generally speaking, to see the same that we did when we were younger. So these are really important to understand, that when we're thinking about designing spaces, whether it's in housing or out in parks, thinking about lighting, for example, for older aging eyes is really important. So voice can change, and cognition can definitely impact attention and memory. So broadly, about older adults and people with disabilities, about 1 in 4 adults live with a disability, and disabilities are more prevalent among older adults, 65 plus, and women. And around 2034, older adults will outnumber children for the first time in history. So that is, and it's just happening around in mostly developed countries around the world, and certainly within the cities and counties and across the US. And just to the right there, you can see how it breaks down by percentage. And mobility issues is one of the highest percentages that is impacted as we with older adults and people with disabilities, cognition, just being able to live on their own, hearing, vision, etc. So how many different types? So throughout, I'm just going to ask some different quiz questions for you to answer. And so our first quiz question is, how many different types of types of adult disabilities are there? Is it 4? Is it 10? Is it 21? So the answer is 21. So, and I was surprised by that when I first learned that there are many different types of disabilities. There's certain ones that come to mind right away, but also we really need to be careful actually just to automatically think about a person in a wheelchair, for example, that there are many different types of adult disabilities. So the next question is, what percent of people will at some point experience temporary or permanent disability that makes climbing stairs impossible? Is it 25%, 50%, or 70%? So the answer is 70%. So again, it could be temporary, just need going through a surgery, etc., but really highlights how high a percentage that is. Okay, we have developed really a suite of assessment tools, and they are mostly related to housing. So the first tool that we ever created is called the HLAT Pro, which is the Housing Livability Assessment Tool for Professionals. And it does what's similar in the OLAT tool that we're talking about here today, but it is focused on for housing professionals and maybe developers that how can we assess the current or future, if we're trying to develop and design from scratch future independent living properties. We also have a housing livability assessment tool for residents called HLAT Res, which allows residents to assess their own facility. And there's the housing livability assessment tool for assisted living, or HLAT for all, and that is definitely also similarly focuses on for housing professionals to go through and be able to assess that property and to score it. We have the outdoor livability assessment tool that we're talking about today, and then we have the transit access livability assessment tool, and that one is upcoming and does similar things. We'll be able to assess and score transit, different types of transit for older adults, and basically for accessibility for older adults and people with disabilities. Okay, so to talk about the outdoor livability assessment tool, so it's very comprehensively assesses most parts for their safety, accessibility, age friendliness, and the degree to which they promote the health and well-being of older adults and people with disabilities. So it says most parks. It goes from small pocket parks up to regional parks. It does not include state and national type parks. And we would love to develop a tool, but this one kind of just ranges up to regional parks. And again, the goal is for parks and outdoor spaces for all. Okay, so outdoor spaces, there's so many positive benefits from going into outdoor spaces. Increases physical activity, can lower blood pressure, lower anxiety and depression, reduce cognitive decline, and can almost immediately sometimes improve mood. So these are really important amenities that everyone should be able to benefit from. And often our parks are designed, which is great and should continue, of course, for younger adults, younger children, etc. Like playgrounds and ball fields, and all those again are really important, but we need to think even think about the older population when we're designing parks. So another fun quiz question. So how much time is needed to reap the health benefits from being in the outdoors? So is it 10 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? Or is it 1 hour? So the answer is 10 minutes. So I, of course, love to share this. It's actually between 5 and 10 minutes, but love to share this information just because it's it really shows it's not that you have to even be out there for an hour or two to really reap those benefits. They can happen almost immediately, getting out into some outdoors, some green or blue spaces, which are like lakes or rivers or something. But both green outdoor spaces are really important and can we can reap the health benefits almost immediately. So I'm going to talk briefly about just the creation of really all our tools, but certainly also OLAT. But for all the tools, we first do a review of existing research out there in the academic journals. We review existing tools or resources that are out there. We conduct community and staff interviews. So in this case, community would be older adults and people with disabilities. In interview one-on-one, and then sometimes in more impromptu, going out to parks and conducting interviews, basically asking, you know, what would you like about this park? Why did you come to this park? Those kinds of questions. And that all helped create the OLAT tool. We also have gone to many parks, and I'll get into that, and pilot tested the tool at many parks. And so that all helped us kind of continue to do new iterations, etc., to develop the tool. So I'm just going to give a little bit of information. Really, you know, the quotes are just as important. Really help tell the story from many, you know, a lot of the facts that we hear back from folks and from the research. So often I say, well, benches are a source of physical activity, which seems counterintuitive, but actually older adults quite often in our interviews will use basically benches. If they know that there are lots of benches at a park, they prefer that, and for good reason. That they see a bench and can rest, and then they can see the next bench and they'll think, okay, I can walk there and I can then sit and rest there. And that helps older adults kind of get farther in a park and kind of do whatever level that they feel comfortable with, but it definitely helps with increasing the physical activity. And of course, during COVID, parks became an essential place, and that continues for people to safely be in the outdoor space and walk with people, engage with people safely. And another quote, this was an interview where at first I had asked, how far do you feel comfortable walking? And the answer was basically, we were in a rec center where I was holding these interviews, and the person basically said from here to the parking lot. So it wasn't a particularly long distance, but that's where they felt comfortable walking. Later, I asked, how much exercise do you get on average in a week? And they said, basically, I get on a treadmill for an hour a few times a week. And that, wow, that's fantastic. But it's kind of represented a lot of the feedback that we got. And that is, if I feel safe, so in this case, there's handrails for me, I can push the stop button. Generally, there's people around, and I can then push myself to do more exercise. And I can do more exercise, I just need to feel safe. So that's something really important that we all need to be thinking about, that the more older adults and people with disabilities feel safe at a park, whether that maybe if they did fall or how to reduce falls, etc., that they will do more physical activity potentially. So on the right is just a little feel for what are some of those indicators. So that there are accessible benches with backs and armrests to aid individuals in standing. There's seating provided in sun and shade all times of the day. Picnic tables are at least one wheelchair accessible seating space. So those are just a feel for some of the indicators, and I'll get into that a little bit more here shortly, but just also want to stress that American for Disabilities Act, ADA standards, are extremely important, but we don't necessarily consider those best practice. So that, digging into the research, etc., and a lot of our interviews really helped us with developing other indicators that we consider best practice. So again, the data collection, we did dig into, basically conducted a literature review. We've conducted 55 interviews that mostly were in between 20 and 21. We interviewed park users and park professionals, and then older adults about the general outdoors. What entices you to go outdoors? What helps keep you longer in the outdoors, etc. And then we went into many different types of universal design standards and many other kinds of tools and policies out there, and dug into that to help develop the OLAT tool, or develop OLAT. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the interview concerns that came up. One in particular that stood out was some concerns about dogs not on leashes. And, it was more of feeling that the feeling of I feel more vulnerable now that I'm an older adult, that if a dog jumped on me, etc., could I still stand, or could they knock me over, etc. So a bit of concern often going to parks, and if there's a lot of just kind of dogs roaming around not on leash, even though generally most parks there are leash laws, unless you're in a dog park. And so just wanted to highlight that myself, I have a black lab, and she's 13 years old, so she does not move around a whole lot, but really have changed my own behavior just to still hook her up to a leash at all times, just so that because I didn't consider other people might look at her as a threat and not feel comfortable in the same space. There were many preferences that people chose. I'm just going to go through some of those from the interviews. Certainly, park was really important, the more convenient that it was. Generally, people went to the closest park to them. Definitely liked parks that are more activated, meaning there's lots of other people doing different activities, whether there is a ball game going on, or there's just women pushing strollers, etc., but that it's activated in different ways. That there's a focus on personal safety there, and that there's plenty of benches with armrests and backs, plenty of consistent signage and direction. This came up very high. We also did some interviews with people younger than 65 and people older than 65, and often it was really interesting that there was similar priorities that people had, and one of them was signage, that it provided really good direction, clear direction, that they were consistent throughout a park, and that there was plenty of signage and that it was readable. That on a website about a park or at the entrance, really have a notice about how accessible is this park. We'd really love to really focus on that in particular, and really how do we help really notify, whether it's a number of 1 to 5 about its level of accessibility, etc. But that would really help older adults and people with disabilities to choose, what park am I going to go to today? So walking loops instead of kind of out and back were definitely the preference. Plenty of shade, plenty of bathrooms, and then ramps wherever stairs were offered. Okay, so this is about our pilot tests. We have gone to 35 pilot tests across 10 states. Majority were conducted in Colorado, but we've been able to span across and actually even get we had one pilot test done in the UK in a park in London, which was very interesting. But all of it was really helpful feedback to help. How do we have this tool help with as many parks as possible that work across the United States? So we'd still love a lot more pilot tests to happen and still get some feedback. So the OLAT, this is the cover of it on the right-hand side, what it looks like, and there's it is a comprehensive tool that there's approximately 150 indicators across 7 categories. So there's the general that has indicators for bathrooms and parking, trash receptacles, and water fountains. And then there's seating, greenery, paths, navigation, activation of a park, and management and operations of a park. So are we ADA compliant in public spaces? So just wanted to highlight this more broadly, that so often we think, well, of course there's the ADA regulations, and so which basically says that all public spaces have to be accessible to everyone. But quite often, all too commonly, they actually aren't. And I wanted just to share one particular story where in Denver, this is Chris Hines. He is a city council person and was running again. They had a debate at a public space, often as kind of a dance kind of place for people to come, and they hold different kinds of activities and music, etc. But there was no ramp or anything to get up onto the stage, and it became, as you could see, and he really wanted to share also these pictures, just because he is such an advocate, obviously, for accessibility. So I wanted to share this, but we really need to stop and look at our spaces. You know, they just assumed he and his staff, and they knew he was coming, and he's a fierce advocate for accessibility, and yet he got there and it was, you know, they thought they could just pick him up and put him on the stage, and you know, it's like 800 pounds trying to lift someone. So we really need to look at our spaces and make sure that they are truly accessible for everyone. So just wanted to give a feel for the indicators. Just wanted to say this is, you know, this is a section on drinking fountains. I did want to highlight that if you see this blue hyperlink, that generally for the tool, if you're doing it like on a tablet, etc., or on your phone, you can click on this and it will actually, if you wanted more information, it's a hyperlink to take you to some information to learn more about that particular indicator. But it just, this up to the right, just wanted to show pictures. There's so many different degrees of drinking fountains, and this one at the top here is definitely not accessible. So you can get to the silver one to the right, and that's at least, you know, generally accessible, but there's many other ways to make sure it's just a push button, and that you can have these fancier ones for even if they had a dog, and they can get water or fill a drinking water bottle for everyone to use. But there's such a different degree of this. So there's the minimum, admirable, and exceptional. And so these are the different degrees of that we've broken out to be able to score these, in this case, drinking fountains. So I'll give some more examples of other sections here shortly. So just another kind of quiz question. So what are some of the concerns that you might have about this bench? So, you know, just taking a look at that, and maybe even from the perspective of an older adult, what are some concerns that you might have? So it might be that it does seem to be too low to the ground. There are no armrests. Often older adults will say that that they would really only sit on a bench with armrests, and they sit next to the armrest so that they have some leverage to help them get back up more easily. And certainly, of course, having a backrest is needed just for comfort. The bench blends though with this greenery around it. So also just in general, benches and other seating are great to be in contrast of colors. So older adults can kind of know very clearly where is the end of a bench, and so to be able to see that contrast of color can be very helpful. And then potentially even someone hiding in the shrubbery here. So those are just a few. You might have come up with a few others, but definitely really looking at the benches that we have out there and how can we improve those for older adults and others to use. So what concerns do you have about this photo? So this actually is, it's in Glenwood Springs. I took this picture actually working on Safe Route to School project there years back. And this is outside the police station. I'm not sure if this has changed since, and I meant to go there just to see if this had changed. But on the other side of the road is a same curb cut outside of the police station. And then you would cross the street and then hit the steps. So this is where, you know, it just, and this often happens more than you can imagine. I could share lots of other pictures. And so really when you're looking around in your community, you'd be shocked to see how often or a sidewalk just kind of ends abruptly. But if you were in a wheelchair, this would make absolutely no sense and would be very frustrating and very challenging to try to get to that sidewalk. You'd have to go along the road, etc. But these kinds of scenarios are definitely out there. So we really need to pay attention and basically do better. Okay, so a little bit about the benches, and this is another section for the picnic tables. And so as you can see, you know, even just putting up a shade sail can do wonders and just to help people find some kinds of shade. And so, you know, benches, again, if they're made of wood, you know, it's preferably not wood because you can get splinters. And then so these are, again, the picnic tables. And what height are they, so that you can see this picture here right to the right where someone in a wheelchair can come right up to the table and sit with others. And actually these two pictures here on the bottom, one again is an accessible picnic table, and the one on the right is just a regular, very old, I'm sure full of splinters, looks like it could fall apart any moment. And these are within the same county at two different parks. And I do want to stress there actually that I think we need to really think about our parks, whether it's a small pocket park up to a regional park, but certainly being very consistent about what we do provide in these parks. That somebody might just be going to their neighborhood park, and how accessible is that park, and not just so that all parks again are accessible to everyone. So real quick, again, I mentioned pocket parks, and how we break this out is that by the number of acres. So less than 5 acres is a pocket park. Neighborhood park is 5 to 15 acres. A city park is 6 to 100 acres. And then a regional park is considered one that's greater than 100 acres. On the right here, there's a table, a chart here that basically shows for picnic tables, for example, when we look back at the scores after doing a number of pilot tests, basically where we scored the different parks, the maximum though number of points that you can get for the different indicators you can see here, and then how the regional parks, so it kind of goes out to, you know, the highest you can score 16, and then you can see the regional park is you know, under 10, that was scored on average for regional parks. The city parks actually ranked higher, more, you know, in the 11 range. They scored on average. Neighborhood parks dropped down to like 7, and so did the pocket parks. So you can really see a big difference on average, how different parks scored. And again, the importance of you know, even these neighborhood parks and pocket parks didn't even meet the minimum, kind of the minimum average scores. We had the highest, maximum, and the minimum, which was about 9. And so some of these pocket park and neighborhood parks actually didn't even rank high enough to meet the minimum average score. So this was another way that we kind of reviewed and analyzed the data, and again, how important it is that all parks are accessible. So the picture up on the right is a very large Huron, that provides direction when you're out hiking, generally on parks, on trails. And this one is we have a section on navigation and signage. And so again, the picture below the Huron is a sign that is really unreadable. It's just talking about the distance to different destinations on trails. But it's really not, it's not readable. And so we really need to stop and really look back at signs, replace a lot of signs that are out there so that they are readable for everyone, large contrasting print, so that everyone can read this. This isn't really readable for anyone, but certainly for older adults and people with disabilities like low vision. So again, went at least 12-point font size, and then contrasting in colors, and use more like Calibri or Helvetica, big kind of bolder print, not the flowery kinds of different font. And then just really making signage throughout the park. As you can see, these are the different indicators that we do have. And then ultimately at the bottom, you can get exceptional. You can get another point if all signs have Braille that are offered. So so that's a good feel for that section of the OLAT tool and what we have people really focus on as ways to assess and score different parks. Okay, another fun quiz question. So despite accounting for over 20% of the population, older adults account for what percent of neighborhood park users? Is it 4%? Is it 11%? Or is it 24%? So the answer is, that didn't work. It's 4%. So very low percent of parks are, 4%, sorry, for some reason that didn't circle that one, but it's 4%. So again, really trying to create parks for older adults so that we have more older adults being able to reap the benefits and enjoy the outdoors with everyone else. So really just some short and long-term goals. We would like the tool to be almost like the walk score, right? It's a tool to help people decide what parks to visit, incentivize park professionals to make improvements and support better designs that help older adults and people with disabilities also come to parks. Provide park professionals, city planners, community members, clarity about what changes are needed, clarity about directing resources. That's probably one of the main reasons we've heard people using it in particular, is kind of trying to make decision where do they put resources that they do have, and going using the tool and scoring different parks in a town or city county, and just trying to come up with some good actionable items and making decisions about where they direct their resources. The next steps, we'd like the tool to score automatically, so it's easier for people. Right now, you can just click the box and it will check it for you, which category, the scoring of each of the indicators. But we would like it all to kind of score together and then score it at the last page, score everything so automatically what the score is. Having an app for the phone, we're definitely in the mode of increasing the use of and marketing of this tool. So please share with any of your networks, or share with us would be great. Any networks you think would be helpful as a way for us to get the tool out to as many people as possible. But a lot of work needs to be done to design and construct and program parks for all people. So in conclusion, we are interested, or others we'd love to team up with just to help with develop tool for state and national parks. And we are looking for more opportunities just to present and share or do workshops or presentations, team up with other agencies and organizations. We'll be doing a lot of that just to kind of share about the OLAT and work with other organizations that have similar goals. We love for more pilot tests to be done, and certainly in parks near or within communities of color, and done by people of color. So that's an area we're really trying to focus on, and have gotten some folks that have reached out, and looking forward to getting some other feedback in that specific area. And then focusing on parks and community resilience, kind of thinking about climate change, and parks have a role in that. And so we'd like to definitely still look into that, and could be a definite focus in the future if other people want to team up again on something related to community resilience. And we certainly can help with more, probably just providing technical assistance. You're welcome to call if you're trying to use the tool or give some feedback. We could possibly help even finding someone if you wanted an outside person to potentially score. But please join or visit our website. There's the tool is on there, and also our other housing tools that I mentioned earlier. So with that, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate that you joined us. Love any feedback again that you have about the OLAT tool. Love to know how different parks scored, and just getting as much feedback as possible. Love to hear from people. If you have any questions or want to partner in any way, my number is there, and my email address, etc. So thank you so much again, and enjoy your time out in parks. Thanks again. Bye-bye.